A Guten Erev Shabbos. If it seems strange to you to imagine two angels, a boy angel and a girl angel, embracing one another, imagine how freaked out the Roman soldiers who destroyed our temple must have felt when they witnessed that scene. The Talmud in Tractate Yuma tells about two cherubs, two representations of angels or keruvim, that were atop the Aron HaKodesh, the holy ark in the temple, within which were the tablets that Moshe received at Mount Sinai. The Gemara further elaborates that these two cherubs were not static, they would shift, depending on how best to represent the relationship between God and the Jewish people. When we were rebellious toward God, the angels would face away from one another. When we were closer to God, the angels would face each other. So how weird is it that on Tisha B'Av, the worst day in our history, when enemies entered the temple, tore down the curtain, and saw for themselves the Ark of the Covenant, they saw the two angels embracing? You would think the opposite would be true. You would think that this was a day of divine wrath, and punishment was coming down on the Jewish people and the Jewish commonwealth through invaders who would pillage and destroy the city and exile the Jewish people. This Gemara seems to say the inverse, that in fact God and the Jewish people were extremely close at that particular moment in history. There's plenty of evidence that we were not behaving so well at the time. The story that's always told on or around Tisha B'Av is of Kamtza bar Kamtza from a different Gemara in Gittin. A man had a close friend called Kamtza, and he sent his servant to invite this buddy of his, Kamtza, to a big kiddush that the guy was making. The servant made an innocent mistake and accidentally invited a different guy with a similar name called Bar Kamtza. You can see how such a mistake was made. Anyway, Bar Kamtza happened to be a long-time adversary, enemy of the host. So this Bar Kamtza showed up at the feast, and the host said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Bar Kamtza said, "Listen, please don't embarrass me in front of all these people. Let me stay. I'll pay you back for all the food I eat. Just don't embarrass me." The host said, "No way." Bar Kamtza said, "Look, I'll split the cost of the catering bill with you. Just let me stay. Don't make a scene." The guy declined. Bar Kamtza made his final offer. He said, "Bro, I'll pay for the entire shindig. Just don't throw me out of here." With that, the host took Bar Kamtza by the arm and threw him out of the party. In front of guests, among whom were some distinguished rabbis who were present, Bar Kamtza was so mad, so outraged, he decided to get his revenge. He went to Rome and he told the emperor that the Jews were planning a revolt. The emperor said, "Prove it." The guy said, "Give me an offering for their temple and you'll see they won't offer it." The emperor sent a goat with him to offer in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, and the guy made a little blemish on the animal so that it would not be appropriate to offer in the temple. Even though you're allowed to offer a blemished animal on behalf of the emperor to preserve the peace. The rabbi on duty in the temple didn't let them offer it, and the emperor got mad and sent his legions to conquer Israel and sack the temple. You see, from a small personal offense, a huge catastrophe resulted. Maybe what this Gemara is telling us is that we have to be nice and considerate and even a little generous to one another, because it will not be good for us if we fight amongst ourselves. If you read the papers, I'm not saying you should, but if you do, you know that there's been an ongoing controversy for months, now years, with the government in Israel. There have been numerous elections, various coalitions, and enough deal-making to make you nauseous. And way, way too many negative headlines about Israel for anybody's good. This week, half of Knesset walked out. Well, not exactly, half of Knesset minus 4. So the other half, plus that 4, which is a majority, passed a law that changed how the Supreme Court holds its power of review. Now, nothing happens in a vacuum. There have been simmering tensions among many different groups in Israeli society for 75 years, and this is the most recent flashpoint that sends people into the streets protesting. If you're hoping for some insight and guidance on who's right and who's wrong, I'm sorry, I don't have that kind of clarity. I've asked people here, I've asked people there. I have yet to find any two people who agree on what's needed or what should be done or even what the problems are. Actually, I did hear of one person who has at least some worthwhile perspective. My brother-in-law in Israel sent a video of a guy standing in front of a shopping mall, Israeli guy. As people pass by, he asks them, "Excuse me, are you for the reforms or against?" Many people say, at least in the video, they say, "I'm against." He answers them, "Well, I'm for it. Can I have a hug anyway?" And everyone in the video, okay, I'm sure it's edited, certainly, but everyone agrees and gives him a hug anyway, even though they disagree. He says to them, the hug is the most important thing. And for good measure, he gives them a chocolate bar. Maybe he took a lesson from the angels on top of the ark. Please don't mistake this for a flippant or uncaring attitude towards changes in the laws in Israel. They are significant. They do have lasting impact and consequences. We are in challenging political times these days, not just in Israel. But I will tell you that I am horrified when people talk about civil war in Israel. That talk should stop. Nothing is worth that. When America was about 75 years old, there was a civil war. There were only about 30 million Americans then, just about 3 times what Israel is today, in a much bigger territory. And 1.5 million casualties. And we're still paying the price. 160 years later, we still haven't healed. Nothing is worth that price. It should not escape our notice that these happenings in Israel took place the week of Tisha B'Av. It's so tempting to allow disputes to color the way we see the world and the way we see others, and the polarization of political and social conversations has been getting more miserable for a while now. But we have the recipe to overcome it if we use the tools in our kit. I don't know who in Israel was studying and reading all the stories that go with Tisha B'Av, or the misery that accompanied it, or the Parsha of the week, but clearly not enough people are, nor are they taking it to heart. So let's review a few points. The mitzvah of mezuzah is in this week's Parsha, along with other mitzvahs of the 10 Commandments, the Shema, and others. But mezuzah we put on our doorposts to protect us, to remind us, and to save us. Like in this story, Onkelos was a famous Jew who did not start out his life that way. He must have spoken excellent Aramaic because our translation of the Torah that's published right alongside the text is his work. Anyway, amidst a turbulent time in Israel 2,000 years ago, the apparently thin-skinned Roman emperor was very offended that Onkelos, this smart guy, had converted to Judaism. So the emperor sent a group of Roman intellectuals to debate with Onkelos and change his mind. They arrived, they debated Onkelos, and wouldn't you know, Onkelos convinced them all to become Jews also. The emperor now had to think of something else. So next he sent not intellectuals, but soldiers. He said, find Onkelos, but don't talk to him. Arrest him and bring him to me. So that's a nice insight into Roman thinking. Try words and then use force if you don't get what you want. Anyway, they found him, they arrested him, and on the way out of the house, Onkelos put his hand over the mezuzah and he smiled. The soldier said, what are you doing? He said, this is the way it works. In your world, you have a king who sits in a palace, and you have to stand guard around his palace to protect him. For our people, our king, God lets the servants stay inside, and he remains outside at his doorposts and gate, at our doorposts and gates, to protect us. The soldiers were so moved by this, they also became Jewish, according to the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. And here's the main thing about mezuzah. If you notice, we always put the mezuzah up on an angle. Why is this? Because in halacha, the Rosh cites 2 opinions about how to install the mezuzah. Rashi says it should be installed vertically, up and down. The other view is of Rabbeinu Tam, happens to be Rashi's grandson, who holds that it should be horizontal, like a Torah, right? When it's upright, when the Torah is held upright, we all have to stand. When it's horizontal, when it's lying down on the reader's table, we're allowed to sit. So the Rosh says to honor both opinions, we place the mezuzah not straight up, not on the horizontal, but on a slant. We incline a little bit towards Rashi's views, and we also incline a little bit towards Rabbeinu Tam's view. The mezuzah at the doorpost of our house reminds us by its very presence that we can bend a little. We can all bend a little. Think about this when you daven the Amidah. At the end, we take a few steps back, we bow to the left, we bow to the right, and we say, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, may the one who makes peace on high make peace among us too, Al Kol Yisrael, amongst the entire Jewish people. One of my mentors, coaches, pep talk givers before I got married told me this very thing. He said, you know how you take 3 steps back and you bow one way and the other way at the end of the Amidah to help and ask God to help you make peace? So do that when you're married too. Take a little step back and bow a little bit and ask God to help you make peace. If anyone in the Israeli government or society is listening to this, this is my kavanah when I'm finishing the Shemona Esrei. I am retreating a little bit, taking a step back and bowing to either side. I'm asking that the one who makes peace on high make peace among us too. I invite anyone else who davens the Amidah on a regular basis or ever to think those same things. And we hope that we have an effect beyond our little personal Daled Amos, our own little sphere of personal existence. This Shabbos is Shabbos Nachamu. The Haftarah that we read has a double measure of comfort. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. Be comforted, my people, says God. Wouldn't just one wish of comfort be enough? Apparently the prophet knew that there would be times when we would need twice as much comfort. Maybe this is one of those times. We had 3 haftorahs of rebuke in the last 3 weeks. This week begins the first of 7 haftorahs of comfort. More than a double measure of comfort follows the 3 of rebuke. Please, God, may it have an effect on us and on Klal Yisrael, and may we stop fighting with each other over trivial things and even over important things. Because at the end of the day, we have much more in common than the things that divide us. If we're divided, we will not be able to do anything. And if we hold together, maybe even with hugs, we can do anything. Shabbat Shalom.